What's up, everyone? It is your guy Tyler here with Mom's Basement MMA, and we're back with our friends at Team Elevation. We're back in Denver, Colorado. We have Austin Hubbard on. So, Austin, first and foremost, thank you for being here, and I hope that that you're keeping Caleb humble.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And yeah, he's a great train partner. He works hard. He's good to have on the team, that's for sure.
He said that you're one of the sweetest, nicest guys, and you're just a true pleasure to be around, and that he's learned a lot from you, and you really helped him feel a part of the team. Like, I know he's relatively new; he hasn't been
Yeah,
there a long time, but he was really appreciative of just what you've been able to do for him. But Caleb and I were talking, and we were making fun of you a little bit. And this is what we said: borderline UFC template fighter-ish. You don't have any tattoos, so
no,
automatically, my father-in-law is a huge fan because you don't have any.
yeah,
I'm sleeved out. Caleb's got all kinds of crazy shit going on. So,
yeah.
I gotta ask you, man. We need to get you some tribal ink, or we gotta get you something so you don't look like a template
Yeah,
fighter in UFC 4 or
yeah.
something like that.
Oh, yeah, it's funny you say that your father-in-law hates tattoos. My dad always hated tattoos growing up also. My mother and my sister have some tattoos though, and he hates them. And it's not that like I don't want a tattoo. I would get a tattoo, but I'm too cheap to get a tattoo. I haven't wanted something enough to pay to get it on me. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather buy other things opposed to spend the money on a tattoo that I haven't found one I really love, that's gonna be there forever and I feel like I need it.
Completely understand, and I will say this: people often ask me here. I'll put it up for the camera, so I'm kind of like
Oh
sleeved out. I got all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and people ask me like, Tyler, did that hurt? And I'm like, yes, yes, it incredibly,
yeah.
yes, and it
Yeah.
cost a ton of money too. So you're definitely
Yeah.
right about that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about just kind of your journey thus far in the UFC and training at Elevation. And I talk to a lot of up and coming fighters all over the country. They fight in places like LFA, CFFC, Titan FC. That's really what my show's all about: is identifying guys like the Caleb Halls, that are only a couple fights away from getting at your level. And I wanted to ask, what are some of the misconceptions that you think some of these people may have, these up and coming fighters may have about fighting in the big leagues like Bellator, PFL, UFC? Is there anything that you'd be comfortable? Is there any wisdom or insight that you have that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah. I mean, the regional scene, for me, like when I was on the regional scene, like I won four different regional belts, all in different states, all with different promotions. And like I see some people who do like win these belts and things like that. Like to me, it never meant anything. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they're cool. It's great, I'm winning, but like that wasn't the goal. My goal is to get here, be successful. So like when I see a lot of those guys kind of be like, oh, I got this belt, I got this belt, that doesn't mean anything because that's a feeder program. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you're building into that, and I don't know. I just to me, I also like we were talking before the recording started. I've never said no to a single fight,
Mm-hmm.
and I also see like some people who, which I get it. Like I get it. It's makes sense, to build your record, look good, get in, but for me, I feel like you need those hard tests before you get in because once you're in, it's gonna stay hard. You know what I mean?
Right.
You see people who kind of get a padded record, a little bit, and then come in and they aren't so successful. Um, I think it is important for people to get those hard tests and not be so picky and choosy on your matchups and stuff like that, before you get into the UFC.
That's huge. And
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting about you in particular is you're a young guy. You have a lot of fights ahead of you if you choose to stay in the game for an ample amount of time. You are you're fighting in the 155-pound weight class, which is the toughest one in Tyler's opinion. It's the toughest weight
Yeah.
class in the UFC. It's either that, maybe 70. But like, flip a coin and have
Yeah,
that argument. Then there are so many killers that are in the division, and what's weird for me is like you're the type of guy when you look back at your career on the regional scene, you're the guy that like headlines or you're the co-main event in every single one of your fights. Now you
yeah,
go to the UFC, you've been on the main card like 3 or 4 times, but a lot of times you're fighting on the undercard. And what
yeah,
is that like for you as a competitor? Because you're used to being
yeah,
like the last fight or maybe the second to the last fight, and now you're one of the
yeah.
first guys out there. Like, was that like a big adjustment you had to make?
Yeah, honestly, the just the 5 round to 3 round, like you said, I literally had as many or more 5 round fights before getting into the UFC than 3 round fights, and then
Right.
obviously all my fights now are 3 rounds. So like have that pace is slightly different. So I did have to make that adjustment where I've been a little notorious for starting slow, and and I think part of that is usually I'm fighting 5 rounds,
Right.
and I do feel like I've done pretty well adjusting to that, and I'm set in that 3 round pace now. But yeah, that was definitely a big adjustment for me. Like, and as far as like starting earlier on the card and things like that, I don't mind it.
Mm-hmm.
I always like getting done early, and then then you can relax. It's over. You can eat
Sure.
food. It's early. If it's early enough, you can still watch the whole rest of the night, kind of relax, and not be in fight mode still. So uh, it has its ups and downs for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, Austin, that I've been meaning to ask this question, and I'm very thankful that you're here, because I can finally ask it. Fighting in the Apex, I'm really curious as to like what that experience is like. To me as a fan, I love it. I love
Yeah,
the Apex fights
yeah,
because it's a really rare and unique opportunity to watch guys at your level of competition
yeah.
fight in a small, intimate setting like that, where you can hear the coaches.
Oh yeah,
As a fan, it's fantastic. I love it, and I
yeah,
hope that when the pandemic's over and the Rona or whatever, when all that stuff has subsided, I hope they keep
yeah,
that. I know it was kind
yeah.
of like brought together as kind of like a workaround. I really love it as a fan and as a fighter. What is that experience like?
It is a cool experience. It's definitely a different experience. And like you were saying, as a fan, I agree with you. You can hear like a perfect example of this is the Tony Ferguson Justin Gaethje fight. Like you could hear the punches. You can hear like the emotion,
Right.
and all the coaching and all that sort of stuff, which makes it a really cool, more like interactive experience, almost more in depth a little bit or personal, and to actually go through it is pretty cool too. Like, yeah, the being quarantined in the hotel and all that stuff kind of sucks, but um I like the process because it's fast. Like you get there like an hour before your fight, you do your warm up, and then you're fighting, you do your interviews, and then you're back to the hotel and you're free. Like it's done, over with, you're out, you're in and you're out. And so in that aspect, I like it. And then also like it's kind of a training room atmosphere. It's quiet. You can really hear your coaches. It's not like a ton of energy from the crowd and things like that. Which, don't get me wrong, I do enjoy that also. But it is different, and there's good to bad on both sides of it.
I think one of the things that is a little bit of a challenge is like, for you in particular, you have a very, very exciting fighting style. You are very aggressive. You take the center of the octagon almost every single time. I like watching the striking. Like you have a very exciting fighting style that a crowd is going to like feed off of, and you really haven't had that opportunity all but one time. Like it's different. Like you're fighting in the Apex. Like yeah, it's one thing to
Yeah,
watch on TV, but I imagine somebody like you fighting like in one of these like big venues like the T-Mobile Arena, like you're
yeah.
gonna get people, like people would flip out if they had the privilege of watching you compete in person. And do you feel like as a newcomer coming into the UFC, like some of those being, I won't say limited, but having the bulk of your fights in the Apex, is that kind of a detriment in a way?
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess I've never really thought about it completely in that sense.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I guess in that sense and point of view, definitely, it's a little less like in-person exposure.
Right.
Um, and yeah, that could play a role, definitely.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about just your experience at Elevation as a whole. How did you get hooked up with Elevation? How long have you been there? I know that you're boys with Curtis Blades. I know that he's been in your corner before. And I'm also
Yeah.
assuming that you've also cornered some of the other fighters that are at your gym. What is that experience like, and how has that improved your game as a professional mixed martial artist?
Yeah. So I moved out here about 6 years ago. And I solely came here to train with the Elevation Fight Team. It was kind of funny how all of that came to be. Originally was gonna move to Milwaukee and train at Rufus Sport, because at the time I lived in Illinois. I was, I think, 3 hours from Rufus Sport, and on occasion would go spend a week there, week here, and train with those guys and really like the gym and everything. And like I said, I came from a pretty small town, only like 10,000 or so people. And I knew in order to be successful, I had to kind of go to a bigger gym where, it's more bodies, higher skill level people, people that are fighting in the UFC and things like that, and kind of branch out and get out of my comfort zone. And so, like I said, I was going to Rufus Sport, and my coach at the time, Joe, and he's like, hey, there's this really really good team out in Colorado. Like, I think you should go check it out and see how you like it and this and that. And so, like, we got a hold of, the team or whatever, and set up a week of training to kind of try out for the team and see how I like it and things like that. And that was my first time to Colorado. And like I said, that was almost 6 years ago now. And I got here and I instantly fell in love with it. The team itself, like, it just was a perfect fit. A lot of bodies at my weight, 55 to 70, a lot of solid training partners. I love the coaches. And then I also, I love the city and the atmosphere and just everything about, living in Colorado. And so I picked up and I moved out here like 2, 3 weeks later, and
Very cool.
been here ever since. And it's definitely been the best thing I could ever do for my career up to this point, for sure.
Austin, I wanted to ask you, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, and it was like the guys that you are stepping in the cage with. I honestly, I do a lot of homework on all of my guests. I've had a few folks from the UFC on the show before, and for the life of me, I cannot think of anyone who's had a tougher run of opponents that you have had. These guys that you have fought against, like, I think, like, I hate to use the word casual, but not all of these guys are household names, but they're
Yeah.
insanely good. Every
Yeah.
single one of these guys that you've fought, it's been death row. Um,
Yeah.
and just like when you sit back and think, like, people are automatically, they'll look at the paper and they'll be like, he's had like a 50-50 run in the UFC. Maybe
Yeah.
this isn't for him. I
Yeah.
have a different opinion. I look at it and
Yeah.
I'm just like, he hasn't had an easy fight. Joe Selecki, I don't know if a lot of people know who he is. That guy's a freaking monster.
Yeah.
He's a tough opponent. Mark Madsen, another monster. And you sit back and you look at all that. You've looked at like some of these guys. Dakota Bush, a young guy, very very good. We'll talk about that one. But when you sit back and you think about all of these tough guys that you've had to fight in the short amount of time you've been in the UFC, like, what are your thoughts? Like, a lot of guys would get frustrated with that. You seem to be kind of like a I don't know. You just seem to be built or wired a little bit differently. Like, you actually want to fight these types of guys.
Yeah.
Like this is what like motivates you. This is why you're
Yeah.
here. So when you sit back and you reflect on like the rough stretch of opponents that you've had, like, what are some of your takeaways?
Yeah. So I'll kind of bring this back to answer this all the way even to my amateur days. So as an amateur, I I've always been a very competitive person. I grew up doing almost every sport there was. I've always been a hard worker, working. My dad owns a construction company, so I've been working with him since, a really young age. And so I've always been a hard worker and always been taught that if you want something, you have to work hard for it.
Right.
And so I've always viewed like my athletic career as the same. Like if I want to do this and be good at this, like I have to work hard at it. And working hard at it doesn't mean taking easy fights. At least in my opinion, as an amateur, I went out and I wanted to fight the very best people I could as an amateur because when it prepares you, it makes you
Right.
better. Like
Right.
when you go pro, like I was saying earlier, I've had 4 different regional titles. I was 10-2 before I got into the UFC, and my opponent's win loss record was like, I forget exactly what it is now. It was like high 80s to 90s to like 30 or 40 or something. I don't remember the number, but I remember it was like really high to, pretty low. And, in 4 different belts in 4 different states and promotions, like I purposely challenge myself as much as I can because that's how you grow. That's how you get better. And, fighting now in the UFC is the same as like, if I want to make money and if I want to be the best in the world, I have to fight these hard people. If I lose, I gotta get better, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I've been doing. I've never lost a consecutive fight, and I've never even went win lose one until I got
Right.
into the UFC, which is driving me crazy. But everyone's journey is a little different. I just gotta keep working hard, and keep learning, keep growing, and I know in the long run it'll be beneficial because
Right.
I'll be prepared for those hard fights down the road because I've been getting those hard fights. And like I said, everyone's like you mentioned earlier, going 50-50, win lose.
Right.
It sucks. It does.
Mm-hmm.
Do I want an easier road? No, I'm fine on the road I'm on. You know what I mean?
There are two hats I wear when I do shows like this. I look like with one hat, I pretend like I don't know anybody, and I look at the paper. I look at the stats, and I try to draw my own conclusions. Like I watch every single one. I've seen every single one of your fights in the UFC on mute, and I just start writing stuff down, like things that I see. I don't want to be an echo chamber for anybody else. I
Yeah.
want to see it for myself. Then there's that like fan hat that you wear. Obviously, I'm a big fan of you, and I like what you've been able to do. And then before I do shows, like I just kind of like pause and think, and it sounds a little hippie-ish, but I try to like reconcile both of those perspectives. I really try to like keep it right in the center of the road. And here's my right in the
Yeah.
center of the road opinion on you. I think you're good enough to be in the UFC. I think you have proven time and time again that you're willing to fight these guys that nobody wants to fight. Vince Pichel is a very great example of that. You beat Vince Pichel, nobody's going to flip out.
Right.
Nobody is going to say, like, I know he's a monster. I know he's 13-2 or 14-2 now,
Yeah.
whatever. He is a monster.
Yeah, he's
But
tough.
you get a win over a guy like that, and there's a very small pool of people that are going to be impressed by that. Like I would be one because I know how good he is. Same with Madsen. He's undefeated, or maybe he's lost once or twice since you last fought him. But like he's like 14-2 or something like that. Like he's a
I
beast.
think he's still undefeated, actually.
Case in point, then, like he's a monster. Like these guys that you're fighting, I think every single one of them have been high risk, low reward. Being honest
Yeah.
with you, every single
Yeah.
one of these guys, like if you win, people are going to be like, eh, and if you lose, people are just going to be like, oh, does he really have what it takes to be here? And I think
Yeah.
you do. And when you look back and like Dakota Bush, he's a very talented young guy. They put him up there against you. I think some of the if you get too far into like the MMA cesspool, like oh they're trying to push Dakota Bush, so they're gonna make
Yeah.
that's why they put him in front of you because they think that he's gonna be able to beat you. and you starched Dakota Bush. Like, you
Yeah.
hurt that kid bad. So when you sit back, like, do you feel like you're given the respect that you deserve? Do you think like people underestimate you? Is the perception of you like, he's okay, but he's not. He's nothing. He's really not all that. Does that like kind of like get at you and like eat at you a little bit, or does that just like motivate you to just go freaking full throttle?
It definitely motivates me. I've always been the type that I don't mind being the underdog. I like proving people wrong, type of thing. So it definitely motivates me more than anything.
They've been putting these young guys in front of you. You fought Max. I'm not going
Yeah.
to talk a whole lot about that. You've talked about that enough. But I will say about Max, I like Max. I think he's young. I think
Yeah.
he's talented. I think he's a tough kid.
Yeah.
He was
He is.
undefeated when he fought you.
Yeah.
Undefeated. They put him in front of you. Again, that's a classic. If I beat this guy, I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
And if I lose to him, it's going to be a big deal. Everyone's going to make it up.
Yeah.
Like, so you're not really in a position where you've been able to really benefit off of some of the names that you have victories off of.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I look at that and I'm just kind of like, I hope you get an opportunity where you can get a name where you get a win, and then people can start like, oh wow, like maybe this guy is for real. That will be the narrative. But I just think like looking at your
Yeah.
resume, I know how good you are, but I don't think everyone else does yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It. I do appreciate that too. But what I was gonna say is like I don't feel like each fight is a new, learning curve type of thing. And I haven't felt like I've been getting to those performances where I'm like, all right, that was the one. That's what I need to keep recreating. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that just goes back to how everyone in the UFC is a high level. It's the equivalent of if you play football, making it to the NFL. That's the goal. That's the dream that everyone works for. And there's a reason why only a small percent of people get to make it here.
Right.
It is hard. So, I feel like I'm taking these hard fights regardless, and I'm learning, but I'm growing, I'm getting better, and I feel like each fight I come out and show that I am continuing growing and getting better. And I definitely feel like this next fight, whenever that may be, will show even a new, better, more evolved, version of myself.
Austin, when you reflect back on the UFC bouts that you have, I know you just kind of said like there really isn't one of your fights where you feel like you've been able to flex your full range of skills, what you're really able to do. But if you had to pick one, like what is one of those fights where you think you at least come close to scratching the surface?
I would say definitely probably the Max Rashkov fight. I put on a pretty good performance. I felt good that night, and I did feel good afterwards. Um, I mean, even my last fight against Vince Pichel, obviously I wanted to win, but I was proud of the advancements I did make. Some of the things I wanted to do, and that was another fight that was a hard fought fight, and a lot of great lessons were learned in that fight, and which will allow me to even be better my next fight, even though I lost the fight. So um, those are, I guess, my top two.
My favorite fight is the Dakota Bush fight. I think that's. I think you showed a lot of really good skills and techniques. So one of the things, like I said, I've watched all your fights without audio, just watching it, so I can have my own opinion. And then after I, write down all my freaking notes on you and all that other stuff, then
Yeah,
I'll listen to it with audio just to kind of see what the sentiment is. Because there are some guys that are really good, like Paul Felder. I know he's done a couple of your fights before. I really,
yeah,
he knows what he's doing. Some other guys I'm not
yeah,
as big of a fan of, but Paul's amazing. One of the
yeah,
things, like one of the critiques that I've heard about you, and I don't know where it comes from, is they've seemed to insinuate in some of your bouts that you don't have a very good ground game. The Dakota Bush fight shows you that's not true. You were
Yeah,
able to, when that fight got to the ground, you were able to shoot on him and maintain top control. And I felt like you were able to do whatever you wanted when you were on the ground with him. Like, I felt like
yeah,
I like that fight because I really feel like you screwed up that narrative and people can't really say that about you as much. Does that
yeah.
kind of like amuse you or take you by surprise when people kind of said that? Like,
No, like statistically, I get where that's coming from,
mhm.
but like you said, look at the people I fought. I fought a, a bronze medalist in the Olympics in wrestling. Anyone's gonna get taken down from that. But
Absolutely.
guess what? I got up as many times as I got taken down.
Right.
I fought Davi Ramos. We all know the type of level grappler he is. I didn't get submitted. Um, Joe Selecki, another great black belt, showing that fight was I got choked kind of early, and I really wish I got to show more in that fight. But that it played out the way it played out, but still he's a great grappler. Even Max Roshkov, he's a high level purple belt, or at the time I think he was a purple belt when I fought him.
Hmm.
And look at the things he did in college wrestling. Look at the things he did in professional jiu-jitsu, and some of the people he beat. Clearly, he's a high-level grappler. You know what I mean? So
I
I
would go as
get,
far as to say I think I think he'll be back. He may not come back to
yeah,
the UFC, but like if he shows up in PFL or Bellator, will not surprise me at all. That's how good that
yeah,
kid is.
he is very skilled, definitely. So like stat-wise, I get why people would say that, but I feel like I'm fighting or I'm going against like the 1% in these high level
Hmm.
grapplers. Like I feel like I've in my UFC career so far, show me someone else who's had that type of high level grappler that I have
There
had to
isn't one,
fight.
man. There isn't
Yeah,
one. Like you are taking these fights, you're you're able to showcase a lot of really good qualities though that make you a fan favorite. I love the octagon control. I love the striking. I like how you're very aggressive. You take the center of the octagon every single one of your fights. I don't
yeah,
see you step back a whole lot. I don't see
yeah.
people take the octagon against you and
Yeah.
make you get on your bike. I don't
Circle.
see
Yeah,
that. Like your footwork's really good, and you just like go in and you go to hurt people, man, and that's what I like about you. That's why I like watching your
yeah,
fights. And when you think back, like I know the Vince fight didn't go exactly how you wanted it to. He's a tough dude. So like, what's next for you? Like, obviously you've looked at that fight a couple times, and it's kind of one of those deals where it's like, okay, here are the things I can improve upon.
yeah,
When you look at the Vince fight today, like, how would you game plan a guy like that, knowing what you know now, having already fought him? How would you
yeah,
compete, or how would you get ready against a guy like Vince today?
yeah. And he was very tough. I think, but the biggest thing I learned, from that fight, was I needed to have a little more urgency to really put some pain in there. And
Hmm.
this is something I also got from Justin Gaethje. He's one of my good friends and training partners as well, and we all are in awe whenever he fights. So I took some advice from him. That you really got to treat this like they're trying to kill you,
Hmm.
and you got to kill them first. And I think that type of mindset will create the more urgency to be to be more successful, as well as I just need to be more of a threat. Like I am always trying to move forward and put people away, but I need a power weapon, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
something that will really kind of make my opponents kind of like, damn, I can't get hit with that type of thing, and that might put me out. So that's also something I've been working on since that Vince fight. Those kind of three things have been my biggest takeaway, my biggest focus now going into my next one. So I think, you know, it'll really show in the next one, and it'll be even more fireworks than what they have been already.
Austin, I was going to ask you. So you alluded to, without getting too specific and too much in the weeds on this, you talked about fighting Vince. That was your last contract. Is that all resolved? Are you good to go? Did you re up with UFC,
Um,
or are
I
you
know
still
my
working with your management on that?
Yeah, my management's still working on it. I know I'm gonna get re-signed.
Okay.
It's not like a matter of I'm waiting to see if I'm still in or not.
Yeah, yeah.
At least from the information I've been given and whatnot, I know I'm gonna have another fight in the UFC. Um, but I haven't heard any numbers or anything like that.
Right.
I was trying to fight, November or December. I've been training as if I have a fight in case someone falls out and I can step in. And but from what my manager's saying, it probably won't be till January or maybe February. So uh, just working in the meantime.
Austin, you get that new contract. Let's just assume it's like a 3 or 4 fight deal. And just knowing how the UFC operates and how it runs, it's one of those things, and I think it's kind of like a misconception. I think it's important for listeners to know about this. So you don't have to say anything, Austin, because like if it gets weird, I can always edit it out. But it's a 3 or 4 fight deal, so that means you're locked into the UFC for 3 or 4 fights, but they aren't
Yeah.
necessarily locked into you for 3 or 4 fights. I
No.
think it's important that people know that.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason why I ask that is because now that you are getting ready to like secure a second contract at the UFC, you're a fan favorite, you're still a young guy, you're not even in your athletic prime yet. But is it fair to say that the stakes are higher now in the second contract? It's like every
Oh
single
yeah.
time I go out there, it's like I have to fight like I'm on the last fight of my deal,
Yeah.
because the 55 class it's just a Shark Tank. And is
Yeah.
there like that added pressure or urgency to get it done, or is it like business as usual for you? Because some guys think about that stuff, other guys don't.
No, I definitely feel the urgency. This will be actually be my third set of contracts now. So like you're not making that 10 and 10 anymore.
Right,
So for them, it's not as big of a deal if you're going 50-50 because you're at a cheaper rate.
right,
They're not as invested into you. But as you kind of start making these more money and they're more invested, they want to see some, in my opinion anyway, this is the way I view it.
right.
They want to see, you string together wins and really kind of put a stamp on deserving to be there. And like I said, I'm going into my third contract. So yes, I definitely feel the urgency to put a streak together and really, start making some waves in this division and get my name more known. Simply because I have gone, win one, lose one, and now we're getting deeper into it. I know you can't just go one for one forever, and they're gonna
Right.
want to keep you and keep investing. So, yeah, I definitely feel that pressure to perform.
And let's talk. So you already kind of hinted, Austin, toward when you think you'll be back out there. So let's just assume it's 2022. And I have 3 guys I've written down as just something to think about. So if I were a matchmaker, these are the fights that I would like to line up in my own little like sick, twisted fantasy world. I'd love to see you fight Patty. I think that'd be a fantastic fight, and I think it makes
I've
sense. I
Yeah,
think that would make a lot of sense, actually.
I've had a lot of people tell me I should fight him, and
Um,
I'm open to it.
I think Alex Munoz would be a good fight. I like him too. He's solid.
Yeah,
He's a
he's tough.
he's a very tough guy. I think he got screwed. What was the fight that I put money on and he lost? I'm trying to remember. I don't know. There was a fight of his recently where he won and he just got completely screwed over.
Yeah,
I don't remember where it was. And then I think another guy that I think would be a really good fight would be Mason Jones.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always been open to fight anyone. I've never been one to call someone out because I really don't care who I fight. So hey, those
You're
all sound good to me.
Austin, you're just a breath of fresh air because without naming names and people can infer who I'm referencing, not everyone's like that.
Yeah,
There are guys, and we all know who they are, that have publicly stated like, I don't want to fight tough opponents. I want to fight.
yeah,
I want the easiest opponents I can get to pad my record so I can get a better contract
yeah,
next time. Like that's the part they leave out, but that's exactly what they're trying to do. And I appreciate the hustle to an extent as like a businessman. I
yeah,
appreciate that, but from
yeah,
being a fan of the UFC, I'm just like, dude, like you're supposed to fight killers. Like everyone in the UFC is a
yeah,
killer. Do what you said you were going to do. And
yeah,
you're not really doing that by taking these easier guys.
yeah. And I'm right there with you. I mean, I understand the money and business side of it. And believe me, sometimes I wish I had that route.
Yeah,
I'd be sitting in a better position with more money in my bank account right now.
sure.
But, it is what it is. I'll take the punches and roll with it, whatever way it works out.
Austin, before I let you go, I have to ask you the mother of all questions. It's about your weight class, and you knew I was going to ask you Dustin Poirier versus Charlie Olives. I mean, that's a huge fight. That's going to be happening in the not so distant future. Your boy Justin Gaethje is more than likely going to fight whoever comes out on top of that one. I cannot
Yeah.
imagine a world in which he does not. So I have to ask. Obviously, I know you're going to tell me that Gaethje is going to be the 155-pound champ again, and I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
I don't. For the record, I don't disagree. But who do you have winning? Do you have Dustin Poirier or are you going with Oliveira?
Um, I do believe Dustin's going to win that, but Oliveira is a very tough and skilled opponent. Would I be shocked if he pulled it off and won? No. But I do believe Dustin's going to win that. And
And
of
then
course, I believe
we'll have a
Gaethje should.
rematch.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the way to do it. And then I think Vanille and Islam should fight for number one contender.
I completely agree. I see Dustin Poirier being and hey, props to Michael Chandler. I like Michael Chandler a lot.
Yeah,
I think Poirier is a tougher guy than Chandler is. I think he can throw. I think he's just a different guy to have to fight
yeah.
against.
He's well rounded for sure. I mean,
And
so is Chandler. He's just
Chandler's a monster. I really like
yeah,
Chandler too. But
yeah,
having looked at that fight, I'm just like Dustin. Like Chandler's one of the toughest dudes in the UFC in any weight class. But if
yeah,
Dustin hits you like that, it's over for you.
yeah,
It's over. I have Dustin winning that fight. I do think we're gonna get a rematch between your boy and DP. I think it's inevitable. It'll definitely be a treat. Austin, before I let you go, I always like to give you the mic and shout out whoever needs shouting out. I know you have a lot of sponsors. I know there's always teammates and stuff that you want to thank. So I want to give you that opportunity before I let you go.
yeah. I'd like to thank Routine Nutrition Supplement Company, K&G Landscaping, Hubbard and Sons Construction, Supreme Cleaners.
Well, Austin, man, as always, it was a huge honor having you on the show, and I can't wait to have you back at a later date.